What's going on, guys? I'm with Ed Ricker here today.
What's up?
And we're gonna fly some FPV drones. The nice thing about this video is that Ed has a lot of experience flying traditional DJI drones and then also transitioning into flying FPV drones. And myself, being a traditional drone pilot, I have a lot to learn from Ed today. So I'm really excited. I think it can be very beneficial for you guys as well. So Ed's gonna share some tips and tricks with us, and we're gonna get to see him fly first person, and let's get right into it.
Yeah, don't lose your cookies, man. Don't lose your cookies. Don't get nauseous. Here we go.
All right, so Ed's all set up. So why don't we talk right now about what you're using? What exactly do we have here?
Yeah.
I know a lot of people know what all your gear is, Fat Shark and so forth, but why don't you explain for the layman and the people who want to get into it?
Well, this is the Armiton Marmot frame. It's relatively new, dropped in like what earlier this year, and so it is a 5-inch FPV quad frame. We have just a conglomeration of different parts on here. We got our GoPro Session 5. We have a 6S LiPo 6-cell LiPo battery. We also have some Mr. Steel motors. If you know Mr. Steel on YouTube, he is a really awesome FPV pilot. He's got a lot of his own equipment that he has on there. We also have a Riot Control F4 board, and our camera is the the Foxeer Predator. And so I actually have
sounds badass.
Oh yeah, this is what happens though. You start to you have one and you make another and then you make another. What I like to do is have 3 working quads, and that way I don't have to be too careful. If I want to be flying somewhat aggressively, I'm not going to have to go home if I break something. I can keep flying and just swap things out. So that's pretty much the gist of this. I got my Fat Shark HD3s and then a Tyrannus X9D Plus right here, and using Crossfire as the radio link there, 915 megahertz, and then we got 5.8 gigahertz coming out of a TBS Unify.
Nice, that's awesome. I can see it's been well used right there as well.
Yes, so everything has a bit of a dent or a scratch. Nothing is perfect anymore on these. But you know, we do what we can, and the good thing about these being made of carbon fiber, they're very robust, and they're able to be crashed quite a bit without too much crying. Oh no! Dude, I hit that stop sign pretty hard.
How long does it take to build one of those? And how much, relatively, outside of the GoPro or whatever camera you put there, how much do these different parts cost? How much money is it to get into FPV drone racing, and like, do you have to watch a lot of YouTube videos to build this, or how would I even go about, after I buy the parts, how would I go about building it, and how long would that take me?
Well, if you're new to building, it's going to take you a lot longer, and you'd probably also be amassing some of the tools necessary. Like if you're not familiar with soldering, then you can best bet you get yourself a nice soldering iron and get going with that. If you're not used to circuitry and doing stuff like that, I mean, that might be a learning process in itself. But if you have an electronic background of any sort, you could probably get going faster. Then there are people like Joshua Bardwell on YouTube who go through pretty much everything, and then some other older channels like Project Blue Falcon and a few others that really go through a lot of the nuts and bolts, if you will, of how to create and to troubleshoot your quad. Because unless you buy something ready to fly from an online retailer, you're going to be putting together pieces that are going to have to be figured out how to be put together, and troubleshooting and what's wrong and why is it doing this, why did it fall out of the sky for no apparent reason. There's always a reason, and that's a big part of it, is troubleshooting on the bench. And that's why a lot of people don't keep going, because it's frustrating. This quad's about $450-ish, I would say, dollars before the GoPro. So with the GoPro, about $600. If I want to fly this over water, I might consider flying something cheaper, or not using the GoPro, or doing certain things to mitigate the risk of falling into the water, because this is going straight down to the bottom.
And how long does that take you to build now, being I would say, you know, being an advanced or having been doing this for a while?
I would say at least an afternoon and an evening. Now, it's easy because I keep my quads identical. That way they fly the same, you know, everything's the same, and they're also swappable with parts.
Got it.
If I were to build an entirely new quad with new components that I've maybe never used before or never in the combination, we're probably talking a couple days at least before it's acting and flying how I want it to.
And I know one question I had, and I think a lot of people out there have, about the new DJI FPV system, being that these are all different parts, like different companies, different manufacturers, etc. What's the advantage of having something like a DJI, or you talked about the ready-to-make drones? I've heard that from drone pilots I know that those aren't as good, that it's better to buy all different parts and kind of like custom to the way you really want it to be. Can you comment about like buying something ready to make, and is this new DJI system any good because it's all kind of like one manufacturer, one brand, or would you be like kind of leery of or hesitant about buying something that were all from the same manufacturer? Or so forth,
there are a couple different good things about the DJI FPV system. It seems to be reliable, at least up to a certain range that's built for. It seems to be very good video, you know, better video than we're used to with our FPV goggles and stuff, because we're usually using analog video, and so that's digital HD video with very low latency, which until now was largely unattainable at a reasonable price point.
So is that latency the best in the industry right now? Would you say DJI, or it's right there?
I think it's comparable to many other existing analog FPV systems.
Okay.
But the fact that it's HD is the kicker. That's the magic right there. So I think DJI's made something it's not going to fail on you because it's tried and true and tested parts that go together. However, there are things I don't like about it, like anyone with these goggles can tune into my FPV feed. Like, you know, even way over there they could tune in. It's just because it's 5.8 gigahertz being broadcast out, and if you can access that, you're good to go. With the DJI system though, it's their own special digital broadcasting system.
Gotcha.
So if you don't have DJI goggles, which means if you don't want to spend the money on the DJI FPV system, you can't watch what your friends are doing. And part of the FPV experience is the community aspect, and part of that community aspect was being able to tune into anybody and watch everybody, and it's fun. It's a group experience. So when you get the DJI system and your friends don't, you've just alienated yourself from that aspect of it a little bit. So that's what I don't like about it. And in terms of compatibility and how things work and troubleshooting, I really have no idea. I spent about an hour trying to help someone over Skype 2 nights ago, and I really don't think I did much at all for him. So I'd have to really get it in my hands before I did. I do not have it in my hands right now. So
got it.
Yeah, but maybe one day. Looking forward to it.
Okay, cool. All right, Ed, so now that you've told us a little bit about FPV, about getting into it, what it takes to build it and so forth, who exactly is this for? Is this for like traditional drone pilots? Do you think they would want to get into FPV drone flying? Is it just for people who want to race? Who should get into this and why?
It's the adrenaline junkies. No, it's just a different perspective. You know, I started out with DJI intelligent GPS assisted auto leveling, auto hovering drones, which was a great way to get introduced to them. But for an FPV drone, it creates a level of excitement that I don't think DJI can match in many instances. Maybe not in all instances, but in many instances. I feel like this is much more reactionary and potentially skill-based in terms of reaction time, piloting, you know, spatial awareness and everything like that. Whereas DJI drones, you add that camera element where you can just hover that thing for 5 minutes and dial in your camera settings exactly right. With this, it's a GoPro on complete auto settings, and if it auto exposes and overexposes the sky, well, too bad. No one's really watching for that anyway. They're watching for the tricks. So it's just a different mentality. It's like if you skateboarded when you were younger, or if you like to watch extreme sports, or if you do something like that, there's a bit of an element of that. I feel a lot of times like a skateboarder, trying to find a spot to fly, being a little covert, trying not to get kicked out, and just doing these tricks and stuff. It really feels like an extreme sport that's not physically taxing my body, which is awesome.
And one thing you talked about was that, and I've heard actually from my drone flying FPV friends, is that if you want to be a good pilot, you have to fly FPV drones. How much of that is true? And like you said, like being able to do all these different maneuvers and moves that most people who fly DJI drones might be aware, but they don't really go into the settings and adjust the pitch, the roll, the yaw, and some of these things that you have to use with an FPV drone. Do you think this has made you a better filmmaker, a drone filmmaker, or has it just expanded your awareness? If I learn how to fly this drone and then I go to like a Mavic 2 Pro, when I fly my Mavic 2 Pro, am I gonna just have more, I guess, feel or control over my drone and just be a better drone pilot?
I feel more confident flying a DJI drone after I fly this thing. With all the safety mechanisms and the bells and the whistles of a DJI product or something similar, I really feel more confident flying one of those after having done this. You fly this over water and then you go back to a GPS assisted drone, and flying over water is like, if it made you nervous at all, you're no longer nervous, because there's so many safety nets with a GPS intelligent drone. With something like this, you get past your fear and you don't feel so scared or so nervous about doing something. Now, of course, DJI drones are more expensive. They're not supposed to be crashed, so they're more fragile. You've been places with this drone. You've seen things. You've been in situations that you would have never put yourself in with a DJI product. And so then to go back to a DJI product, it just feels a little tame, you know? It doesn't feel bad, it just feels more tame and more able to be controlled, you know? A little more under control, I would say.
So you said it's flying over water. So if I were trying to do some more advanced moves where I was flying, I don't know, there's a gazebo right over there. You can't see it in the camera, but if I were flying like through that gazebo, or I wanted to do some move where I was flying around and being a little risky, as you said, and more advanced, would flying an FPV drone, is it more psychological or is it more like physical? Maybe I'm just beating a dead horse here, but I feel like it helps you in some way get those more advanced shots.
Well, in terms of just stick movement and reaction, and remembering what's behind you and under you and to the left and the right when you're not looking at it, that's where the spatial awareness comes in with FPV. If you start out flying FPV, all you're concerned about is what's right in front of you in the camera view. But when you get to be accustomed to flying FPV frequently, you're more aware of what's behind you and around you, and you can actually kind of move around with that in your memory. And so I can back up through objects because I remember how I was aligned when I was looking at them. So there are some tricks, and remind me to do them, where they're kind of like blind moves, where you're moving and you don't really see where you're going, but because you remember where they were and it sticks in your brain in a 3D space somewhere up there in your brain, you can still move through space and accomplish that movement. So yeah, I think flying these things, it just makes you more confident as a pilot in general, and that'll bleed over into any type of piloting you're going to do.
I've seen some new commercials, like I told you about the Kohl's commercial where they were flying indoors in a retail store. Do you think FPV flying is just an entity to itself, or do you see this as a way to incorporate into traditional filmmaking? Because myself, I still want to do a lot just with traditional drone flying, and for my channel, just traditional drone tutorials. But I feel like if I'm shooting for a client, I feel like if I use this drone right here that you have, this FPV drone, and add some shots into it, if it fits the particular project that I'm working on for that client, I feel like it could add an element that could really be useful. Do you see it as a part of, an integral part of filmmaking, or is it just something that you just get an adrenaline rush and more for community and drone racing?
You're limited by the camera with one of these. It's got to be light. So that's why we're using a GoPro.
Good point.
You could use a full-size GoPro, which can maybe up your production value a little bit, but you're still not going to be matching the red camera on the tripod that's the rest of the Kohl's commercial or something. So it can be kind of limiting in that way, but you can make a GoPro look pretty good. But I think it lends well to action environments. There are some flyers like Johnny FPV that does a lot of automobile drifting videos. There's Mr. Steele who does some other stuff. Oh, Johnny FPV also does like motocross, and he also did some downhill skiing videos where these shots you would just never be able to get. Now, in some of his compilations, he just has drone footage, but I can imagine that would be part of a bigger video that would incorporate other elements as well. But as with everything, I mean, any type of drone work, you don't really want to overdo the drone stuff. If
Yeah.
you do too much drone stuff, you're saturating the video, and you know, variety is always good. So unless
Yeah.
it's a video just about what drones can do, I think any video is going to incorporate other elements, other cameras, and other types of shots in addition to FPV style. But yeah, in the future, I mean, I'm hoping people will find much more complex, or just different ways to utilize an FPV drone that's not just racing and breakneck speed, but actually something that's creative and something that other cameras just can't accomplish.
All right, I think we've learned a lot. I think this was really helpful for just learning about how to build a drone, who it's for, what type of flying we can do. Why don't we get into the tips and tricks and just wrap it up?
Some of the things that I really like to do with the FPV drone, especially when I'm flying near buildings or around trees, is to do diving, power rolls, split S, and all these different types of like tried and true tricks, like the base, the foundation for most FPV flying. And then from there we can incorporate other things, but there's these few elements like the roll, the flip, and the power loop that pretty much happen, and the split S, that happen in almost every flight. And so we're going to try to incorporate that into some of these elements, some of these different areas that we're kind of around right here. It's a great area to fly, and with any luck, I'm not going to lose this on the top of a building. So here we go.
I was wondering, when you started out, did you just learn this all on your own, or did you take a class from one, or a course, or how did you get started?
My first experience with FPV was using the program Liftoff. So some people from Liftoff, it's a simulator on Steam, and it's basically like FPV on your computer, and it's a way to save yourself a lot of heartache, a lot of crashing. And
Nice.
so I basically learned how to fly using a remote just like this.
Sweet.
It's got a USB on the back, and you can just fly straight from your computer. And that way, once you do get the confidence to get your own quad and build your own quad, you already have some flights under your belt.
Nice.
And you're not going to annihilate your quad the first flight. At least I hope not. So that's where I started. So Velocidrone, Liftoff, DRL Simulator, DCL I think is another one. Yeah, they're all under 20 bucks. Some are free, and it's just a really great way to get started without risking real damage or getting the thing stuck in a tree or whatever else could possibly happen.
Cool. I'll put links to those in the description below, so if people want to get started.
There you go. Awesome.
All right.
And these goggles have a fan, which is really nice, because it's kind of hot out here. Not too hot, but kind of hot. And sometimes this thing will get foggy.
Nice. Let's do it. All right, guys. We're going to go fly.
Let's take off. Okay. And ready?
Whoa.
It right here is the earbud. So there's a microphone in my video transmitter.
Okay.
And I can hear what the quad is doing. I actually hear the motors. And if I'm flying this intricately and fast, really far away, then the delay of sound that I'm hearing can start messing me up. Also, if I'm flying with other people, I can hear my quad only in the earbud, and I can really hear what I'm doing as opposed to being kind of disoriented by all these buzzings and the buzzing sounds in the sky around me.
Got it. Ed, you were saying that while you were flying, the vibration reduction went on the GoPro.
Yeah,
Kicked in automatically or something like that?
Sometimes I wonder if the GoPro, when you shut it off, or maybe you run out of battery and it powers off, it kind of reboots some of its menu or something, because what happened there was the image stabilization turned on. And you think that'd be a good thing for a drone, but not for an FPV quad. These oscillations are so quick, so small and fast that the video turns to jello. And so you might have noticed in some of these high throttle punch outs earlier, we were getting a little bit of video like degradation and kind of like a jello effect. And now it should look pretty decent in comparison, just because stabilization was turned off, which is a little bit counterintuitive, but it's just the way things have to be.
And so when you're doing that shot with just straight down like that, what are you trying to do? Or is it a difficult thing to do against the wall like that?
Yeah, it can be difficult, especially if it's windy. Then your drone is pushing you, or the wind is pushing you into the building, which makes you run the risk of landing on the roof. Here's another trick I like to do. And this is an intentional small crash, if you will. So this is what they call a wall bonk.
Okay.
So you basically touch the building with your drone, the bottom of it.
Yep.
And just kind of like hit it lightly, and then
I heard it.
pop right back off. Here, actually, I can do this side of the building if you want to see. I'll do it up here.
Oh, okay,
So
cool.
you see it right here?
Yeah.